Hello and welcome. You're watching Head to Head on UATV and I'm Alas Gerjuk. The reform of institutional care system for children continues for almost a year here in Ukraine. It is estimated that by 2026 it will reduce the amount of orphanages and replace them with family-type facilities. So what results have already been achieved and what is expected to happen next? To talk more about this, we welcome to the studio today Mykola Kuleba, Commissioner of the President of Ukraine for Children's Rights. Hello and thank you for being with us today.
Hello.
It's a pleasure to have you here. So, in 2017, Ukraine has started this reform on childcare, right? And what was the purpose of this?
The purpose is a huge number of institutions in Ukraine. From the Soviet, we have 750 facilities. It's different type of institutions for children. And in Soviet Union, orphans live there. Maybe 90% of orphans, but now we have 95% of non-orphans, children who have families, and 5–6% who is orphans, and they need a different type of families. But it's a problem because from the Soviet, all support, all services was based on institution, on orphanages. If you have any problem in your biological family, government can take your child and place to the institution. Or families themselves can place child or send child to any type of institution. It's with different problems. It's with some sicknesses, different types, with the children with disabilities and the other. It's only 18% is children with disabilities, but the other children have no disabilities, but because poverty of family, but because any problem. For example, parents don't want care or bring up their own children, and government say, okay, we can do it. It's from the Soviet the system works. That's why last year or 3 years ago, President gave me mandate as a commissioner to create this reform. And last year we had a National Reform Council with the President and Prime Minister, and I had a speech there and presented this reform, and President and Prime Minister supported this reform. And now we have 1 year action plan which finished in the end of this year. And in this time, each region, each oblast create their own regional plans of the institutionalization. Because we have to know which institution we closed first, which second, because this reform for next 8 years. And we should clearly understand what we have to do with this institution.
But then we have to replace these institutions with some kind of other state services, right?
Yeah, we can use these facilities for the other services, but not allow to leave children there. Because if child needs support, if family of this child needs support, we should give these services, we should give this support, financial, social support, or maybe rehabilitation or medical support. It's different, but we should clearly understand. That's why these regions now prepare these plans, because they should know which children is there and which support they need, because they should develop these services.
According to this new strategy, how would this state assistance will look like if not orphanages, if not institutions?
Thank you for this question, because the same time we have decentralization reform. All power and money goes to local communities.
Yes.
And we want really these communities be responsible for their families and children. It's a process now, and government now changing finances system to directly send some money for different services and support the services on the community level. But number one, when we stop placing children to institutions, when community, local community, will be responsible, will define in time these problems or crisis, family crisis, and to support this family.
Yes, and of course it's better to deal with the problems on the place, on the scene. You mentioned this really impressive and shocking figure: 95% of children who are living in orphanages, they do actually have families and parents. What does this mean in Ukraine? Should we start educating parents first?
It's 100,000 children. It's 1.5% of whole children's population in Ukraine.
This is an extreme figure.
Yes. That's why we really should start educate children on the school level, because we have a lot of divorces. Maybe 65% of families, new families, divorcing.
65%.
65%.
It's more than a half of marriages.
Yeah, it's very big number of families. That's why it's better to work first of all to develop services to support families. Yeah, from the beginning. And the other is educational program, parenting program for children on the school level. That's why we are creating now these instruments in Ukraine. And we believe it works effectively with the children to stop this crisis. And it works in different countries. That's why it's time for Ukraine to stop placing children to institution, to strengthen families and give them enough support. It's not only finances, maybe less finances, but more it's social support.
Psychological care.
Psychological care. It's different. It's different services. It could be hundreds different services which works in Europe or US because we have this experience. But we should develop this on the local level and support this from the governmental level and allow children live happy life in their own family.
Well, the polls are saying that 90% of orphanages graduates are not ready to take care of themselves in real life. They're not able to integrate into the society, and they are not. They require this constant state assistance. And 90% of them is almost everyone, basically. So, what does this new strategy, new national strategy, pre-plans to help these children to integrate?
Now we have a special program. Ministry of Social Policy developed special program for these children, for their integration, for graduates. And in this strategy, we want more involve NGOs to this work. And government should support NGOs because they work so effectively with children who graduate institution. And the other thing is special national program we have from the last year from the president. It was his initiative to give special subsidy for graduates, especially for housing them. And now local government have money from the national budget to buy flats and premises for housing graduates. And this year, thousands graduates will have a social dormitory.
Okay. How many graduates do we have annually?
Each year we have some thousands graduates.
Thousands. Yeah. And thousands would receive housing.
But not all of them needs housing because a lot of them have housing in their own family. Yeah, but a lot of graduates need it.
What about applying for some higher education, institutes, universities? Would there be any more quotas for these children after orphanages?
Why we have this reform? Because statistics says that graduates have no motivation for studying, have no motivation to live independently because they don't know how to live independently.
They have always been dependent on the system and on this institution. That's what you mean.
Yes, that's why we should talk more about prevention, about how to support this family and stop and forbid placing children to institution because it's not normal. Because after that, we are thinking how to care, how to help this youth after the institution. Sometimes it's impossible because this child was formed in this old Soviet system. And it's hard with the child 16 or 17 years old to give him understanding how to live independently.
Yeah.
Sometimes,
how to fight for yourself, basically.
Sometimes they cannot understand how to cook a food, how to buy something, because they never did it before. Like we were in a family, we could take money and go to a market and buy something. It's impossible for children in institution. They should live there. They should be in one facility all time. And every day they will have meal, they will have education, and the quality of this education is very low.
Yes.
And that's why no motivation. They don't understand why they should study.
Do something and fight for something if everything is granted by the state. Well, this is absolutely different children care that Ukraine is used to after the Soviet practice. You mentioned that there was a first stage of the reform. The next one is going to be the regional one, when they will estimate how many orphans and children who need this parenting care they have in their regions. What would you say about the first stage? What was happening within this last year?
First stage, as I told, is to finish developing these plans, regional plans, and start assessment of children in some institution, because each region define which institution they will close or transform first.
Okay.
That's why in that institution, for example, now in Kyiv region or Zhytomyr region, they now have a process of assessing children in institution 3 in Kyiv region, 3 in Zhytomyr region. Yeah, and the other region will do the same, 3 or 5 first institution where they assess children, and then they will do assessment of families from which children came to institution, and then they will create a plan how return back this child to their own family, to the own community.
How
which
to integrate
services,
them back.
and which services they should provide for this family. What they need, maybe they need repair their house, or maybe they need the other support on the school level, maybe inclusive education. That's why now we are in this process to understand which services first we should develop, and then which money from the national budget, which money from the local budget we should spend for these services, which service we can have from NGO, which service should be governmental service, and now we have this process. And really, in this stage, very important to have educational program for social workers to provide these services, and central level should create special standards. We have some, but we need more standards of social services, and it's process we have now.
So the priority is to reunite families, the separated families.
Yeah.
Let's look on this parenting issue from a different perspective. It is extremely hard in Ukraine to adopt a child, and especially for foreigner. Why is that, and what is being done to target this issue?
Yeah, it's really last year's less and less international adoption we have here in Ukraine, but we have quite big number of Ukrainian families who adopted children and foster care. We have 14,000 children who live in foster care, and more than 50,000 children who live in kinship care. But about international adoption, as I told, we have only less than 6,000 children who could be adopted. And it's a huge line of Ukrainian families who want to adopt these children. That's why it's hard to adopt from the other countries. But we believe that these steps we have now for orphans will help us to decrease number of orphans 10
throughout
times.
Ukraine.
Yeah, because in this reform we understand maybe we will leave children with very severe disabilities, who need a palliative care. But all children should live in their families, in own families or adoptive families. Yeah, all children need a family. It's our reform about children who really need a family. And we, as a government, as a society, should provide enough help, enough support for each family who need this help.
It is really an extremely important issue that reflects on our future. Well, thank you so much for this conversation, for your contribution into this reform. Let's hope that it will be prosperous and it's gonna bring results as soon as possible.
Thank you very much.
This was Mykola Kuleba, Commissioner of the President of Ukraine for Children's Rights. Thank you for watching Head to Head. I'm Olas Garjuk. Goodbye.